Chicago in 1928 was a city built on two sets of books. There was the official ledger, written in the neat, aspirational ink of city planners and politicians. And then there was the real one, a shadow ledger written in blood, whiskey, and the cold, hard calculus of territorial power. The 18th Amendment had banned the sale of liquor, and in doing so, had turned the city's thirst into a river of gold for those ruthless enough to control its flow. While the South Side answered to the bombast and brutish efficiency of Al Capone's Italian outfit, the sprawling North Side was the sovereign domain of the Irish. It was a kingdom held together by tribal loyalty, raw nerve, and the strategic genius of the North Side Gang. Their nominal leader was the volatile George "Bugs" Moran. But the gang's true center of gravity, its quiet, calculating mind, was a man named Finn O'Malley. They called him the Ledger. Finn was an anomaly in a world of broad-shouldered enforcers. He was slender and spectacled, with the perpetually ink-stained fingers of a scholar. His weapon wasn't a Thompson submachine gun. It was the double-entry bookkeeping system. He could look at a column of figures and see a narrative of loyalty or betrayal. He knew every drop of beer brewed, every barrel of whiskey smuggled, every dollar paid in protection, and every cop on the take. The entire North Side operation existed as a vast, complex, and perfectly balanced equation in his mind. His devotion to the gang was absolute, but it wasn't about crime. It was about legacy. The O'Malleys, the Morans, the Drutches. Their families had crossed the Atlantic together, refugees from famine, and had fought for every inch of their existence in the hostile streets of a new world. The gang, to Finn, was the armed and armored expression of that shared history. It was a covenant, and the most sacred part of that covenant was his bond with his younger brother, Sean. Sean was everything Finn was not: charismatic, quick with a laugh, and a natural on the streets. He was a rising star in the gang, admired for his courage. Finn, the quiet protector, watched over him, balancing the books on his brother's life as carefully as he did the gang's finances. The precarious peace of the beer wars was maintained by an unwritten code, a set of underworld rules that separated business from barbarism. But that code was being systematically dismantled by a new breed of gangster, men who saw tradition as weakness and loyalty as a commodity. The most dangerous of these new men was inside their own house. His name was Frankie "Smiling" Macek. Macek was Moran's top gun, a man whose matinee idol looks and easy charm masked a chilling, reptilian psychopathy. He saw the future and believed it belonged to the organized corporate structure of Capone's outfit, not the tribal loyalties of the Irish. He began secret talks with the South Side, offering them the one thing they could never take by force: the North Side delivered from the inside. Finn, the man who saw the world as a ledger, was the first to spot the imbalance. A shipment of Canadian whiskey would vanish from the inventory, but the corresponding loss wouldn't appear. A speakeasy's weekly take would be lighter than expected. Macek would be seen wearing a new, custom-tailored suit that his official cut couldn't possibly afford. These were small, seemingly unrelated entries, but in Finn's mind, they formed a damning new column: treason. He took his meticulously documented suspicions to Moran, laying out the discrepancies on the table in the smoke-filled back room of a bar. "Frankie's on the take, Bugs," Finn stated, his voice low and certain. "He's selling us out to Capone, piece by piece." Moran, who trusted Macek's gun more than Finn's numbers, waved him off. "You're seeing ghosts in the margins, Finn. Frankie's solid." The ghosts materialized in a hail of lead and shattered brick on the morning of February 14, 1929. Macek had orchestrated a masterpiece of betrayal. He used a fake tip about a hijacked liquor shipment to lure a hand-picked group of 7 of the gang's best men, including Sean O'Malley, to a garage on North Clark Street. He then ensured Moran and Finn were occupied elsewhere with a fabricated emergency. At 10:30 a.m., as the 7 men waited, a black sedan, indistinguishable from a police car, rolled up. 4 men emerged, 2 in uniform. Believing it a routine raid, the Northsiders relaxed. They knew the drill. They dropped their weapons and obediently faced the wall. The staccato roar of the Tommy guns was a sound that would forever be etched into the memory of the city. The execution was swift, impersonal, and absolute. The killers were gone in minutes, leaving behind a tableau of such horrific violence it would be immortalized as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Finn arrived 20 minutes later, his heart a cold knot of dread. He stood in the doorway, the metallic tang of fresh blood overwhelming the smell of oil and brick dust. He saw the bodies, tangled together like discarded puppets. And then he saw him, Sean, his younger brother, lying against the wall, his face turned towards the door, his eyes open and empty. The covenant was broken. The family legacy was annihilated. In that moment, Finn O'Malley felt nothing. The part of him that could feel grief or rage or despair died in that garage with his brother. All that remained was the cold, silent, and perfect machinery of his mind. Moran, upon seeing the carnage, fell apart. The North Side gang fractured and withered, but Finn did not. As he looked at the bloody ledger of his brother's life, a new account was opened in his soul. It was an account of vengeance. The debtor was Frankie Macek. The debt was absolute. And Finn O'Malley, the ledger, always ensured that every debt was paid in full. This would not be a revenge of bullets, which was too quick and too merciful. It would be a slow, meticulous, intellectual dismantling of a man's entire existence, an unraveling so complete that his death would be a mere footnote. Part 2. The Ghost in the Margins. In the chaotic weeks following the massacre, Finian O'Malley executed a vanishing act. He settled his affairs, destroyed his personal records, and walked away from the wreckage of the North Side gang. To the underworld, he was presumed dead or fled. He became a ghost, his name a forgotten entry in a closed book. He resurfaced in a different Chicago, the one of clerks, streetcars, and quiet boarding houses. He was now Francis Malone, an unassuming accountant with a fabricated work history from Cleveland. He took a deliberately obscure job in the auditing department of a large laundry conglomerate, a business he knew, through his old North Side intelligence, to be one of the outfit's most important money laundering fronts. He was now inside the enemy's fortress, but his camouflage was perfect mediocrity. For 3 years, he was a model of quiet competence. He was punctual, diligent, and utterly forgettable. His superiors saw him as a reliable but unambitious cog in their machine. They had no idea they had hired a phantom, a man whose mind was a weapon of mass destruction, patiently waiting for the right moment to be deployed. Every night, in the solitary confinement of his small room, the real Finn O'Malley emerged. He did not drink. He did not seek comfort. He worked. He was building his weapon, and it would be a work of art, a revenge so personal and so intellectual that only he and his target could ever truly understand its terrible elegance. He decided against a direct approach to the authorities. T-Man Frank Wilson and his untouchables were making headlines, but Finn knew they were fumbling in the dark, looking for a needle in a haystack. Handing them the needle was too simple, too impersonal. He would not give them the answer. He would give them a puzzle, a cipher. He would force them to see the world through his eyes, to follow the path of his own cold logic. For 3 years, he gathered his data. From his position within the laundry company, he traced the invisible threads of cash that flowed to Frankie Macek. But he went deeper. He became a student of Macek's life, an obsessive scholar of his vices. He learned that Macek loved 3 things above all: high-stakes poker, horse racing, and custom-made suits. These vanities would be the keys to his undoing. Finn began to construct his cipher. It was a single sheet of paper, a seemingly random jumble of numbers and letters, designed to look like a bookie's discarded betting slip. But to an investigator, it was a map. The first set of numbers was a series of winning poker hands, full house, aces over kings, followed by a date and a dollar amount. Finn had spent months cultivating a contact at one of Macek's secret high-stakes games to get these exact details. The amounts corresponded to Macek's biggest wins, untaxed windfalls. The second set was a list of racehorses and betting odds from specific races at Arlington Park. These were not Macek's wins, but his losses. Finn knew Macek often paid his gambling debts using intermediaries. These numbers were a trail leading to the bagmen. The final entry was not a number, but a tailor's measurement. Inseam, 32, shoulder, 46, silk lining, monogram, FM. It was followed by the address of a high-end tailor on Michigan Avenue. This single sheet of paper was a masterpiece of intellectual revenge. It was a puzzle that, when solved, would not only lead the Federals to Macek's untaxed income, but would humiliate him by exposing his vanities and vices. It was a ledger of his soul's corruptions. Finn typed a short, anonymous cover letter addressed to Frank Wilson. It read, "Mr. Wilson, you hunt monsters with nets, but the most dangerous ones are ghosts. You look for their income. You should be looking at their sins. Find the man who understands these numbers, and you will find your ghost. This is not a gift. It is a key." He mailed the envelope. Then he returned to his quiet life as Francis Malone and began the second phase of his plan. The psychological unraveling. The law would take Macek's freedom. Finn would take his soul. Part 3. The Unraveling. Frank Wilson's office at the Treasury Department was a mountain range of paper. When the cryptic letter and its cipher arrived, it was almost dismissed as another crank submission. But something about its structure, the cold, precise nature of the puzzle, intrigued him. Felt different. Felt like an accountant's challenge. He assigned his best analysts to it. Took them weeks, but they cracked it. The poker hands led them to a casino informant. The horse racing odds led them to a bookie who, under pressure, identified Macek's bagmen. The tailor's measurements led them to the tailor himself, who, faced with a federal subpoena, opened his books. The receipts for Macek's lavish wardrobe, paid for in cash by known outfit figures, became the cornerstone of their case. The cipher had given them a perfect, undeniable roadmap to Macek's hidden finances. The indictment for tax evasion stunned Macek. He was a killer, a lord of the underworld. The idea of being brought down by numbers on a page was absurd, insulting. He was convicted in a swift, brutal trial where his own expensive suits and gambling habits were put on display as evidence. Capone, seeing him as a liability, cut him loose. This was when Finn's true personal revenge began. While Macek was out on appeal, a series of small, strange, and unnerving things started to happen to him. Macek's wife, a glamorous showgirl, received an anonymous package. Inside was a collection of hotel keys and love letters, detailing Macek's numerous affairs with a precision that was terrifying. His marriage, the foundation of his public image, crumbled in a storm of accusation and recrimination. The exclusive outfit-protected golf club where Macek spent his afternoons was suddenly subject to a series of relentless, anonymous tips to the police about illegal gambling in its back rooms. The constant raids made the place toxic. Macek, the man who brought the heat, was quietly asked to leave. His sanctuary was gone. Even his car, a custom-built Cadillac that was his pride and joy, was targeted. Finn, using an old contact, had a mechanic subtly damage the engine block in a way that was almost impossible to detect but would cause it to break down constantly. The symbol of Macek's power became a symbol of his impotence. Each of these acts was a phantom sting, untraceable and deniable. But Macek felt them. He felt a cold, analytical intelligence moving against him, an invisible enemy who knew his secrets, his routines, his weaknesses. He became paranoid, isolated, and terrified. The man who had orchestrated the massacre of 7 men was now being psychologically dismantled, piece by piece, by a ghost. He had been subjected to a living autopsy. The end came on February 15, 1936, 7 years and 1 day after the massacre. Frankie Macek, a broken and forgotten man, was playing a late-night game of bowling. A lone figure walked up behind him. There was no grand confrontation, no final words, just the sharp, clean report of a single gunshot. The murder was never officially solved. The papers dismissed it as a minor gangland hit, a loose end being tied up. Miles away, in a different city under a different name, Finian O'Malley read the small news brief. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, no closure. He felt only the quiet, profound emptiness of a perfectly balanced equation. He opened a small, private ledger he had kept for 7 years. It contained only one account under the name Frankie Macek. On the debit side was a single entry, Sean. He took out his fountain pen, dipped it in black ink, and made the final entry on the credit side. Consisted of 2 words, paid in full. He closed the book. The last account of the North Side gang was finally settled. The requiem was over.